Michael is a man of about 35 years old who has lived all his life with the principle of friends are my family. Since childhood, he was very sociable, open, and always found himself in the center of attention. His entourage consisted of people of all ages, professions and views, but they all appreciated Michael for his kindness, sense of humor and ability to support him in a difficult moment. Michael was also loved at work. He worked in a small advertising agency as a creative manager, and his projects were always non-standard and attracted the attention of customers. Despite his success in his professional and friendly life, Michael's personal life remained empty. Women always noticed Michael and often tried to start a relationship with him, but something always went wrong. He could start talking, go on a few dates, but nothing went beyond that. It wasn't because of indifference to love or fear of duty. It's just that Michael didn't seem to be able to find the same his person. He lacked some kind of spark, the feeling that it was exactly that. In addition, he was comfortable in his lifestyle, work, meetings with friends, travel, parties. His friends often joked that Michael is an eternal bachelor who is more suitable for the role of a cheerful friend than a husband. He himself only smiled back and didn't take it seriously. He didn't feel lonely, even when he was home alone. Emily was one of his old acquaintances, whom Michael met through mutual friends many years ago. Their communication has always remained superficial. They could say hello at a party, discuss the weather or share a funny story, but they never moved to a more serious level. Emily was a very independent businesswoman. She worked in real estate, traveled a lot and valued independence. Despite this, her life also had its difficulties. Her family pressured her to settle down and finally get married. In addition, legal nuances appeared in her professional field, which required her to be officially married. One day Emily decided to turn to Michael with a rather unusual request. She knew that he was reliable and easy to communicate with, and most importantly, free. Emily contacted Michael and asked to meet. They agreed to meet in a cozy cafe in the city center. Michael, as usual, came slightly late, but greeted her as if they were best friends. After a few minutes of normal conversation, Emily finally dared to say, "Michael, I know it sounds strange, but I want to offer you something unusual." Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise, but kept an interested look. "I need a fake marriage. This is just a formality that will help solve some of my questions." Michael was silent for a few seconds, thinking about her words. He couldn't help but ask, "Why me?" Emily smiled. "Because I know you're reliable. You won't pressure me and I can trust you." At first, he doubted, but then, knowing how difficult it was for Emily to ask for help, he realized that he could not refuse her. He only asked one thing, "Is this really just a formality?" Emily nodded. "Absolutely." So Michael agreed to a marriage that seemed to have nothing to do with romance. The painting was modest and without any solemnities. In the small office, Michael and Emily put their signatures, exchanged short smiles, and parted. Each of them was sure that this was only a short episode in their lives that would have no consequences. But fate already had its own plans. After the fictitious marriage, Michael and Emily hardly communicated. Their life remained the same as before. Michael spent time with friends, working on his projects, and Emily went about her business. But one event turned everything upside down. 3 months after the painting, Michael accidentally met Emily at a party with mutual friends. He didn't expect to see her, and he came to spend time with the company. When their eyes met, Michael decided to say hello. "Oh, Mr. Husband," Emily joked as he approached. "Lady wife," Michael replied with a slight irony. "I didn't think I'd see you here." The conversation, which began as a joke, turned into a longer communication. They talked about everything: work, plans, life. Michael realized that Emily was not at all what he imagined her before. She was smart, ambitious, with a keen sense of humor. Her independence, which he perceived as coldness, turned out to be a sign of strength and confidence. After that party, they began to communicate more often. Initially, these were casual encounters. Emily called to clarify the legal details of their marriage, or Michael just wrote to ask how things were going. Over time, their conversations became more personal. Emily once invited Michael to dinner to thank him for helping her solve her problems. They spent the evening in a small Italian restaurant, where Michael first noticed how pleasant and warm her company can be. "You know, I didn't even think we'd ever communicate normally," Emily said as they shared dessert. "Well, I didn't expect my marital life to start like this either," Michael replied with a smile. One day, Emily offered Michael to go on a short trip together. She needed to visit a client in another city, and she thought it would be fun to take Michael with her. "We are still husband and wife," she said half-jokingly. Michael agreed, and this trip was a turning point for both of them. On the way, they told each other stories from childhood, laughed, sang songs in the car. In the evening, when they were having dinner at a small hotel, Michael felt that he was very pleased to be around Emily. "You know, you're completely different from what I thought," he said as they drank tea. "And you? You turned out to be much better than I imagined," Emily replied. After that trip, Michael began to think more about Emily. He noticed how pleased he was to receive messages from her or to see her smile. However, these thoughts made him doubt, would it not happen that he would complicate their agreement? Emily also began to notice that Michael had become more to her than just a person who helped in a difficult moment. But she was afraid to admit it, because she was afraid to destroy what they already had. One evening, when they were watching a movie together at Michael's house, he suddenly asked, "Have you ever thought that our marriage could be something more?" Emily looked at him in surprise. She was silent for a few seconds, and then replied, "I don't know." "And you?" This conversation ended uncertainly, but both had the idea that perhaps their fictitious marriage was not just a deal. The chance meeting of Michael and Emily at a party with mutual friends was a key moment when their relationship began to change. The party was held in a cozy apartment filled with laughter, music, and relaxed conversations. Michael, as always, was the center of attention, told funny stories and joked with friends. Suddenly, he saw Emily at the table with drinks. She looked very different from their previous meetings. Not a business, reserved woman, but a relaxed, smiling, and even a little mysterious. "Now, I didn't know you were at events like this," Michael said, approaching her. "You too," she replied with a smile. "I didn't think you had time for parties outside of your marital life." They exchanged jokes and then spoke more seriously. While the other guests were having fun, Michael and Emily stepped aside and started talking about their lives. It was the first time they really openly shared their thoughts and experiences. "You know, I never thought I would dare to ask someone for help the way I asked you," Emily said, playing with her glass of wine. "And I never thought I would dare to agree," Michael replied. Their conversation lasted until late in the evening, and when saying goodbye, Michael felt that he did not want this moment to end. Beginning of regular communication. After that party, they began to communicate more often. Michael wrote Emily short messages, joked or just asked how she was doing. Emily answered, and their correspondence gradually became part of their daily routines. One day, Michael invited her to dinner, saying he wanted to thank her for an interesting conversation at the party. Emily agreed, and they spent several hours in a small cafe, laughing and discussing their plans for the future. "Can you imagine your life in 5 years?" Emily asked. "Honestly, I never thought about it." "And you?" "I always imagined myself successful, independent, but now I think that's not all I want," she admitted. Michael felt that these words were important to her, and for the first time in a long time, he wondered if his own life could change. The trip that changed everything. A few weeks later, Emily invited Michael to go on a short trip together. She had to solve some cases in the neighboring city, and she needed company. Michael readily agreed. The road was easy and pleasant. They listened to music, laughed and even stopped at roadside cafes to try local food. During this journey, Michael began to notice how much his feelings for Emily had changed. In the evening, when they stayed at a small hotel, Emily ordered dinner in the room. They sat at the table, drank wine and talked. Michael felt that he was comfortable with her like no other woman. "You know, I feel like we've known each other much longer than a few months," he said. "Maybe it's because we really complement each other well," Emily replied, and there was more than just friendship in her voice. Opening of feelings. After that trip, they began to spend even more time together. Michael felt that he wanted to see Emily more often, hear her voice, and be there. But it scared him. He understood that their marriage was only a formality, and he was afraid of complicating their relationship. Emily also felt the change, but she was more cautious. She was afraid that her feelings might scare Michael or ruin what they had already built. One day, when they were watching a movie together in Michael's apartment, he suddenly asked, "Have you ever thought that our marriage could become real?" Emily frosted for a moment, and then replied, "And you?" This conversation ended uncertainly, but both realized that there was more than just a deal between them. This was the beginning of their new path, from fictitious marriage to true love. After meeting casually at a party and traveling, Michael and Emily began to spend more time together. At first, it looked like friendly communication, shared lunches, walks or even trips to small exhibitions or concerts that Emily loved. One evening they were walking in the park, talking about their favorite books. Michael told how as a child he dreamed of becoming a writer, but later chose a more practical profession. "Why did you give up your dream?" Emily asked, looking at him. "I probably thought it was not serious. But sometimes I think it's not too late to try," Michael replied. Emily smiled. "I think you would do a great job." This support was unexpected for Michael, but very valuable. He realized that Emily wasn't just listening to him. She really saw something in him that he didn't notice himself. Common moments that have become a habit. Over time, they began to rely more on each other. Emily could call Michael in the middle of the night when she had a hard day, and he always found words of support for her. Michael began inviting Emily to meet his friends, and she gradually became part of his social circle. One of the most important events occurred when Emily fell ill. Michael learned about it from a mutual acquaintance and immediately came to her apartment with medicine and food. He stayed with her all day, cooking soup and putting funny movies to cheer her up. "I always thought you were the guy who joked more than worried," Emily said, wrapped in a blanket. "And I always thought you were too independent to let someone worry about you," Michael replied. This situation strengthened their connection. They began to trust each other more than before. The first steps to the realization of feelings. The rapprochement between Michael and Emily was slow but inevitable. Michael began to realize that he missed Emily when she wasn't around. He caught himself checking the phone in the hope of seeing her message, or looking for her gaze when they were in the same company. Emily, for her part, also couldn't ignore the changes in her feelings. She noticed how her day gets better when Michael calls or offers to meet. She began to wonder if their fictitious marriage could grow into something more. One such moment occurred when they were choosing a gift for Michael's friend together. They went shopping for a long time, joked, argued about the choice, and then stopped at a small coffee shop. "You know," Michael said, looking at her through a cup of coffee, "I'm glad you turned to me then." Emily smiled. "You know, me too." The decision to stay together. One day, after another evening spent together, Michael dared to talk about their relationship. It was a quiet evening at his house when they watched old movies. He turned off the TV and went back to Emily. "Emily, I want to be honest. I think our marriage has long ceased to be fictitious. For me, it's more than just a deal." Emily was silent at first, trying to find the right words. Then she said softly, "I feel the same way." This was the beginning of a new stage. They decided to stay together, but this time consciously and with the desire to build a real relationship. They understood that it would not be easy, but were ready to work on their future. The test that strengthened them. The first test was to meet Emily's parents, who still believed that their marriage was just a formality. Michael, as always, conquered them with his charisma, but it took time for them to believe that this was a real relationship. Every day their lives became more harmonious. They arranged a shared apartment, began to plan trips and even discuss the future. Michael began to think about how to make their second marriage official, this time with a wedding and real vows. This period became for them real proof that sometimes the best relationships begin unexpectedly, and true love can be born even from, at first glance, practical agreements. Beginning of conversations about children. After deciding to stay together, Michael and Emily gradually began to talk about the future. They enjoyed their new status as a true couple, spent a lot of time together, planned trips together, and even considered options for moving to a larger house. One day during dinner, when Emily was joking about the arrangement of their living room, Michael suddenly said, "Do you know how the kids will run around here?" Emily stopped, smiling. "Do you really want children?" "Of course. I think we could be good parents," Michael replied. This topic was a new step for them in the relationship. They began to discuss how and when they would like to start a family. Their conversation was filled with dreams and hopes, but they had no idea what difficulties awaited. First attempts and first doubts. A few months after deciding to have a baby, they realized that it could be more difficult than it seemed. Every month brought disappointment. At first, they didn't attach much importance to it, thinking it was only a matter of time. But when half a year passed without results, Emily began to worry. One evening, when they were sitting in the kitchen, she said, "Maybe it's my fault. I've always been so busy with work, maybe it affected me?" Michael took her hand and replied, "Emily, you shouldn't blame yourself. We'll deal with it together." Appeal to doctors. After several months of unsuccessful attempts, they decided to turn to specialists. Emily and Michael underwent a series of tests that showed that both have problems with conception. It was a heavy blow for them, especially for Emily, who always wanted to keep everything under control. After consulting a doctor, they learned that the chance of becoming pregnant naturally is very low. "We can try different methods, including IVF, in vitro fertilization, but it will take time and patience," said the doctor. Michael tried to support Emily, but it was difficult for him to see how it affected her. One evening she confessed, "I think I let us down. Maybe you regret that we decided to be together?" Michael hugged her and replied, "I will never regret us. We'll get through it together, like everything else." Tests of patience and emotional ups and downs. The first attempts at treatment were unsuccessful. The treatment required considerable financial and moral efforts. Emily often seemed tired and depressed. Michael also felt the pressure, but tried to stay optimistic. One day they got a negative result after the first IVF attempt. This was a big disappointment for both of them. Emily was crying while sitting in the kitchen, and Michael couldn't find the words to comfort her. "Maybe this is a sign that we are not destined to have children?" she said. "No, it's not a sign. This is just another obstacle that we will overcome," Michael replied firmly. Supporting each other. Despite the difficulties, they did not give up. Michael always found a way to cheer up Emily. He organized small surprises for her, invited her for walks or even just prepared her favorite dish. Emily also tried to support Michael. She began to encourage him to return to writing texts, and even bought him a notebook with the inscription, "Your dreams are yet to come." Second chance and hope. After a few months' break, they decided to try again. This time they approached the process more deliberately. They received a new consultation, changed the approach to treatment, and even found a support group for couples with similar problems. This period became a time when their bond only strengthened. They learned to talk about their feelings frankly and not to be afraid to show weakness in front of each other. When Emily finally got a positive pregnancy test result, it was like a miracle. They hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it," Michael whispered. "No, we did it together," Emily replied. A new stage in their lives. This period of hardship helped them realize how important they are to each other. Michael and Emily learned to appreciate every moment together and became not only a spouse, but a real team that is ready to overcome any difficulties for the sake of a common future. After years of struggle and hardship, the birth of their first child became a real miracle. Emily gave birth to a healthy girl, whom they named Sarah. This day was the happiest day of their lives. When Michael first picked up his daughter in his arms, he felt something that he had never felt before: incredible love and responsibility. "Look at her, Emily, she's so perfect," he said, trying to hold back his tears. "It's ours, Michael. We were able to do it," Emily replied, crying too. Michael began to tell his friends and family that now his life was divided into before and after Sarah's birth. He joked that from now on all his plans revolve around two women in his life, Emily and his daughter. Family development. Sarah quickly became the center of their world. Michael and Emily spent every possible moment together, trying not to miss a single first time in a child's life: the first tooth, the first steps, the first word. Michael discovered himself as a caring father. He changed diapers, lulled Sarah at night, told her fictional fairy tales. Emily laughed that Michael in his new role began to look even happier than ever before. "You know, if you spoil her like that, she'll have a hard time in life," Emily said jokingly, watching Michael dance with little Sarah in his arms. "And who said that I want her to be difficult?" he replied. Family expansion. A few years later, Michael and Emily decided that they wanted more children. Due to the difficulties with the first conception, they were ready for new trials, but, surprisingly, this time everything happened much easier. Emily became pregnant for the second time, and their son, Jack, was born. 2 more children were later born, twins, whom they named Lily and Lucas. Now their house was filled with laughter, children's games and chaos that only added to their happiness. Michael joked that they were now a team of 6 people. Michael's role as father and husband. Michael has discovered a new side. From the person who used to care more about friends and work, he turned into a caring family man. He became the one who was always there, at children's parties, school meetings, during family walks. "I thought the best part of my life was being young with friends," Michael once said. "But now I realize that the real happiness is these little noisy monsters." Emily also thrived as a mother. Despite the daily worries and troubles, she always found time for every child, as well as for Michael. Together they raised children in love and trust, trying to teach them to appreciate family and support. Great family traditions. Over the years, Michael and Emily created family traditions that united their family. Every Friday, they organized family evenings when everyone watched movies or played board games together. Every summer they went on vacation to the mountains or to the sea, and they always celebrated Christmas at home, decorating the Christmas tree with the whole family. "Did you imagine this life when we first met?" Emily once asked, watching their children play in the yard. "No, but you know what? I couldn't even dream of something so beautiful," Michael replied. Reflections on the path traveled. One evening, when all 4 children were already asleep, Michael and Emily were sitting on the veranda with cups of tea, looking at the starry sky. They remembered everything they had to go through: a fictitious marriage, the first meetings, difficulties with conception, the birth of children. "Strange, isn't it? We started as just an agreement," Emily said. "And now we have everything. I didn't even know what I wanted," Michael replied, taking her hand. Emily smiled. "Do you think it's fate?" "I think it's us. We just never gave up." The final moment. The story of Michael and Emily ends with a picture of their large family gathering together at a festive table. Their children laugh, argue, share stories, and Michael and Emily look at them with a sense of incredible pride and gratitude. They realize that true happiness is not only what you get in life, but also what you build together with those you love.